We the Ambazonia, special loyalty. Praise to our Savior who granted us the freedom. Allegiance to the hero who fought along we gather. Glory to glory, we rise and never to fall. Here in a nation, flowing with the holy. Glory, glory, glory to the Father for making you a nation, a joy forevermore. Ambazonia, land of freedom, you shall live in plenty, meet in our need, and your children shall be like the stars above. The Most High God being the watchman of His nation. Ambazonia, land of freedom, you shall live in plenty, meet in our need, and your children shall be like the stars above. The Most High God being the watchman of His nation.
Alarm bells are ringing inside the Biya system. Former loyalists are speaking out. Franck Biya is under fire. Chantal Biya is reportedly battling and flooring vendor Ayolo in Switzerland. And Yaoundé appears increasingly unsettled. Is the Biya system beginning to unravel from within? This definitely is the question that many are beginning to ask. And of course, that is the question that we are going to center our conversation this evening all around. Greetings, you're welcome to the JMA Connections. My apologies that we are beginning this broadcast late. I promised that we're going to begin this broadcast at exactly 4 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time, and at that time was going to be 9 p.m. Central African Time, 9 p.m. West African Time, but unfortunately, we are beginning really 2 good hours behind schedule, and so my apologies for that. And so let's go straight away into the substance of our discussion this day. Cameroon is entering a moment when the alarm bells are no longer ringing only from the opposition. They are sounding from around the system itself. Former military spokesman Colonel Didier Badjet is openly diagnosing institutional failures. Sam Severin Ango, a very big voice too within the media circles in Cameroon, is questioning the disturbing leaks surrounding an anticipated government reshuffle. Franck Biya is facing increasingly direct resistance to dynastic succession, while explosive allegations now point to a rupture between Chantal Biya and Samuel Mvondo Ayolo around an absent Paul Biya in Geneva. When former loyalists speak, family factions collide, and nobody seems certain who controls the center of power. The question becomes chillingly simple. Is the Biya system merely confused, or is it beginning to unravel from within? That is at least the opinion held by a lot of political pundits across the political spectrum, not only within Cameroon, but even outside Cameroon, and especially within the international media. So if you are just joining in on the JMA Connections this Sunday, the 26th day of July 2026, then fasten your seatbelt and don't go away. And if you are visiting for the first time, please do well to hit on that subscribe button and personalize, so that once anything drops here, you will be the first to know. And of course, do well to share the link and share as much as possible, let's reach as many people as possible. And I'd like to see your participation on the live comment section. If you have questions, I can respond to those questions. I mean, right now as the broadcast is going on. So thank you very much for your very kind attention. And I'm delighted that you have taken time off to tune in with me this evening. Let's begin our broadcast by looking at or by watching this short video by this very brave activist, a gentle lady, a citizen of la République du Cameroun. Take a watch.
Je vais m'adresser à Franck Biya. Et je sais que je suis longue, mais je vais vous parler en 15 points. Et écoutez-moi très bien. Franck Biya, quand un aveugle guide un peuple, ce n'est pas le chemin qui disparaît, c'est tout le monde qui tombe dans le ravin. Votre père nous a fait tomber dans le ravin. Franck Biya, quand un homme sans vision dirige une nation, et c'est le cas de votre père qui n'a aucun leadership, ce n'est pas le pays qui avance, c'est le chaos qui s'organise. Nous attendons le chaos au Cameroun, Franck Biya, à cause de vous et de votre père. Franck Biya, quand un cœur égoïste prend le pouvoir, Biya a été égoïste. Il a passé 40 ans à organiser sa protection à lui et seulement à lui, au point d'inviter Israël au Cameroun. Quand un homme sans vision, quand un homme au cœur égoïste prend le pouvoir, la nation devient un champ où seul le chef récolte et le peuple meurt de faim. Nous mourrons de faim.
I interrupt her there to say this brave lady is addressing Franck Biya personally. As you can see, she's addressing Franck Biya personally. And I'm interrupting to try to, say some of the things that, she's saying in English, because I know not everyone in my audience understands the French language. So this brave lady is addressing Franck Biya personally. And she is not, treating the succession question in Cameroon as an abstract constitutional discussion. Her underlying message is that Cameroon is not a monarchy. Paul Biya's presidency is not family property. And therefore, Franck Biya should not imagine that proximity to his father automatically gives him a legitimate claim to succeed him as the next president. She challenges the growing narrative portraying Franck as the natural heir and treats the prospects of a father-to-son transition as a continuation of the same political system that has failed the people for over 43 years, rather than a kind of genuine political change, which, according to her, is what the vast majority of the people are aspiring to, genuine political change. So she says a second important element in what she is saying is that the warning that she is giving is embedded really in her tone. Because here tone is a warning. She appears to be telling Franck that inheriting the Biya political machinery would also mean inheriting the anger, the grievances that have accumulated, that are pent up in the people. Yeah, grievances and accumulated record associated with more than 4 decades of Paul Biya's rule. So in other words, he is saying that the Biya name may provide access to powerful networks, but also carries considerable political baggage. The implicit question that she's asking is, why should Cameroonians who have spent decades demanding political change accept another Biya simply because he is younger? Let's listen to her again.
Au Cameroun, Franck Biya. Quand un manipulateur gouverne, la vérité devient suspecte et le mensonge devient la loi. Au Cameroun, le mensonge est devenu la loi. Franck Biya. Quand un petit esprit s'assoit dans un grand fauteuil, il ne grandit pas, c'est l'institution qui rétrécit. Franck Biya. Quand celui qui doit protéger sa nation pire est corrompu, le pays devient une proie et le peuple un butin. Vous avez payé tout le monde au Cameroun. Franck Biya. Quand un homme sans amour pour son peuple gouverne, la patrie devient une prison à ciel ouvert. Nous sommes tous des prisonniers en devenir. Franck Biya. Franck Biya. Quand le pouvoir est confié à l'indigne, parce qu'il y a une indignité dans ce que vous êtes en train de faire, la dignité quitte le pays. On a perdu toute forme de dignité au Cameroun.
So the intervention, this lady's intervention is not just strategic, but it's also very, very, very important with respect to the fact that she comes from the viewpoint of the civil society, from the viewpoint of the ordinary Cameroonian, from the viewpoint of a disgruntled people who believe that just the name Biya is now synonymous to absolute failure. So the intervention also reflects a wider rejection of attempts to normalize dynastic succession before succession has even occurred. The significance is not merely that one woman is criticizing Franck Biya. It is that ordinary political voices are increasingly addressing him as though the succession contest is already underway, challenging him before he has formally declared himself a presidential candidate or he has formally been appointed the vice president. This movement, this approach, puts Franck Biya directly in the limelight and places him side by side what is considered by many to be Paul Biya's dismal 43-year record that has left the country as one of the least developed in the entire world. Today, Cameroon represents a mockery. Today, any mention about Cameroon provokes laughter from across the world, because when you look at the nature of the roads in the country, you look at, the energy sector, you look at, people just ask, how can people be witnessing this kind of suffering in a country that is extremely blessed with so much, not just in terms of natural resources, along with human resources? So my quick analysis of this message by this, this brave lady is that, the timing of this message is first and foremost important and strategic. Paul Biya remains outside Cameroon amidst intense speculation about his health and eventual return. The vice presidency remains vacant, and of course, Franck Biya continues to appear in succession discussions. There were talks that, everybody screaming on social media, white smoke, gray smoke, black smoke, and all of those people say, people should remove champagne from the fridge. It seems the news is true, this and that. There were some that came up and said, no, forget. Paul Biya is returning to Cameroon this Sunday, the 26th day of July 2026. But if not, he will return on Monday, which is, this 27th day of July 2026. But Sunday is already gone. And there are reports, as you hear right ahead, about some serious infighting between Mvondo Ayolo and Chantal Biya, but most especially also that the private jet that was chartered to bring Paul Biya back to Cameroon, even just for the semblance of it, this Sunday or this Monday, has left Geneva again, and without Paul Biya and with no clear plans of when it is due to return. So under those circumstances, every attempt to portray Franck as the natural continuation of his father's rule risks sparking a counter-mobilization around the argument that Cameroon is a republic, not an inheritance. This lady's intervention fits squarely into the emerging resistance narrative. There is also a paradox for Franck. His father's name is simultaneously his greatest political asset and potentially his greatest political liability. Without Paul Biya, Franck will not command anything approaching the present level of, succession speculation. Yet, because he is Paul Biya's son, or supposed son, opponents can and are portraying his possible elevation as an attempt to preserve the existing order under a different face. He would therefore have to, overcome the argument that a Franck presidency represents not alternation, but Biya after Biya. You know, when they say the French, they say, un Biya peut en cacher un autre. You see it from that perspective, it's like, oh my goodness. But again, do not forget that while, we'll say that that particular name will represent a challenge, is because even within the system itself, there are voices that are saying the best way to keep the Biya system, to keep the Biya legacy, is not to introduce Franck Biya at this time. There are voices that are coming up from within the Bulu Ekambeti political elite right now that are saying there should be a brief transition through someone else before power is returned to Franck Biya, so that people don't actually see that it is from Biya to Biya, a position Jacques Famendongo so militantly rejects. So the intervention by this brave lady becomes still more significant when placed alongside the broader political turbulence in the country. Issa Chiruma is challenging the post-2025 political order and appealing directly to the military. We talked about that. Rivalries and the succession speculation are intensifying around the presidential establishment. Paul Biya's prolonged absence has created extraordinary uncertainty. And I should say now, therefore, that against that backdrop, voices like this lady's, outing demonstrate that the succession battle is escaping the confines of, to the palace and the CPDN elite. It is a clear demonstration of that fact that they do not have the exclusiveness of control or of discussions around this particular issue called the succession question in Cameroon. It is absolutely democratized without their, abetting it. In every nook and cranny of the country, this is being discussed right now because of the actions and outings of activists like this one. So the public is beginning to weigh in on the debate over who has the right to govern after Paul Biya. And this is my sharpest takeaway from this brave lady's outing, that Franck Biya's problem is no longer simply whether powerful people around his father will accept him. It is whether Cameroonians themselves can be persuaded that 43 years of Paul Biya should logically be followed by Franck Biya, perhaps with another 43, 45, or even 50 years. If increasingly outspoken citizens begin rejecting the premise before the succession even arrives, then the battle over the post-Biya order may already have started, long before it would be announcing who is preferred or who is the preferred heir, or who Paul Biya has finally decided should take over. You see, outings like this ones, or like this one, may seem just any other noise making, on social media. But if you get to understand the growing influence of the social media and how it is impacting the shaping of thoughts, the shaping of opinions, and how it is also generating actual action in some areas, then you will not take this lying down. Because Cameroon may seem right now like, a quiet country where everything is going normally, where the political elite that represent less than 2% have taken everybody hostage and have held everyone spellbound, and that they can easily send out soldiers and police and they will chase everyone under the bed. But do not forget, I said here that the cobweb system that Paul Biya put in place can only stay in place as long as he's at the pinnacle. The moment he's no longer at that pinnacle, the craziest thing now is to wonder where the centers of power will be. Who will be able to call the shots? This is where the issue is right now. And if you look at the prospect that Biya may actually close his eyes definitely without naming a vice president, because every indication points to that. And then with the constitutional void created by the elimination of the role of the president of the Senate in succession issues, the situation becomes extremely dicey. And now enters Colonel Didier Bajek, and I'll show you Didier Bajek, who was the spokesperson for the Army of Cameroon. Of course, he was the head of the communications unit at the Ministry of the Defense. And he is one person who appeared to demonstrate unquestionable loyalty to the system in place and frequently defended it with, some kind of a tenacity. That is really unimaginable. But to find Didier Bajek doing something just like a U-turn right now, with the current context, is quite amazing. And do not forget, he may be retired, but he was a colonel. Listen to him.
Alors, je dis que c'est... bonsoir d'abord, je suis très très déçu parce que je ne suis pas certain qu'on pourra mener ce combat. Tu sais, eux, ils ont la stabilité dans le mal. Parce qu'ils ont les moyens de l'État et tout. La seule chose qu'ils...
Just before you continue listening to him, I want to drop that I took time off to review the 2-minute, 12-second clip, and I did take time to cross-check recent public remarks attributed to Colonel Didier Bajek. And I should say the clearest thread running through this intervention that you are listening to is a blunt criticism of what he calls a strategic drift, weak institutional communication, and a governing system that has allowed the long-standing failures to become normalized. Because, I could really not, take time to transcribe whatever I said to render it word verbatim as he is speaking. I just decided to, jump into the substance of it, and, I'll eventually bring you a quick summary when he's done. But what I want to point out here is when you hear someone like Didier Bajek refer to the governing class, to the governing elite as ces bandits-là, that is those bandits, this tells you how grave the situation is and how terribly things have gone down.
Ce qu'on peut faire, c'est de durer et de sécuriser ce qu'on appelle le contentment, c'est-à-dire que la politique du contentement, où ils bloquent, ils savent qu'à l'usure, ils vont avoir les gens à l'usure, et petit à petit, l'affaire va s'édulcorer et ils auront encore les mêmes bandits qui vont exploiter le Cameroun et tout. Donc c'est un peu compliqué cette histoire-là. Ils ont réussi à faire... Et tout ça, c'est la faute de l'opposition. C'est la faute de l'opposition. Je suis pas très... Aujourd'hui, si jamais l'opposition avait su qu'il était fort, n'est-ce pas qu'ils se seraient réunis autour de lui, pour dire que bon, voilà, on essaye de te soutenir. Et puis, on voit parce qu'on savait que c'est lui qui avait les meilleures chances.
So as you're getting it quite clearly, for those of you who understand French, Bajek's central argument is that Cameroon is paying the price for what he describes as a strategic failure and an amnesiac system of governance, a system that repeatedly forgets lessons from past crises rather than correcting structural weaknesses. Recent excerpts of his commentaries, or some of the excerpts that are picked from his commentaries and other commentaries he made before this one, describe him as criticizing authorities for allowing opacity, poor communication, weak anticipation, and institutional inertia to become embedded in government practice. It's Bajek talking, eh? It's not some other person. This is Bajek, the very same kind of Bajek that yesterday was swallowing fire and, screaming at the top of his voice how the Biya system is the best thing that ever happened to Cameroon. So he also emphasizes communication. Bajek argues that the real challenge in Cameroon right now is a failure of institutional communication, essentially saying that government creates fertile ground for rumor and destabilizing speculation when they fail to communicate transparently, consistently, and credibly with citizens. That point is particularly relevant today, very relevant today, with recurring controversies over Paul Biya's health, succession, alleged decrees, government paralysis, and competing narratives about who is actually controlling the state. You notice that at some point, the Minister of Communication, René Emmanuel Sadi, will come out and say the President of the Republic, is in Switzerland and doing very well, and he's just spending time taking some holiday, and from there he's handling the issues of the state, is controlling the statecraft from there, and so people should stop making careless noise about the fact that he's in hospital and all of those things. And then at the same time, you found the presidency trying to show that no, in effect, Paul Biya is good, because I'm saying that they engage in crisis communication, but from a disjointed point of view. Because while the Minister of Communication said that, you notice that the First Lady and the rest of the Biya family decided to organize a birthday party for Paul Biya Jr., for Paul Biya's son, in Geneva, like to show that, oh no, all that talk about Paul Biya's state of health is horrible, he's fighting between life and death and all whatnot is unfounded. So they held that party, but the incongruity was that Paul Biya himself, though present in Geneva, is not seen anywhere in the videos circulating regarding that particular party. Of course, that's something that he ought to be there. And when I raised it on this platform, that the fact that Paul Biya was not present in those videos, the fact that Paul Biya was not present at that birthday celebration, demonstrated beyond reasonable doubt that the talks flying around that Paul Biya was seriously sick and was battling with his life are rather founded. I know this pushed the presidency to try and see if they could do some AI initiative, created a picture which they shared with Jeune Afrique, and on that picture they inserted Paul Biya on a wheelchair in the midst of the celebrants. And I think they did not realize that picture that inserted Paul Biya inside there showed clearly that he was seated on a wheelchair, and that was going to generate a controversy bigger than the one they were trying to stop. And at the end of the day, that is exactly the effect that it generated. Because very quickly, when the public seized on that particular aspect, Jeune Afrique immediately stepped down that picture from their website and apologized that the picture appeared to have been AI generated. But if it were AI generated, how did it get to Jeune Afrique? Because they've been getting all their information consistently directly from the presidency, either from from the office of the deputy director of the civil cabinet, Oswald Baboke, or from the Secretariat General, from the General Secretariat at the presidency, headed by Ferdinand Gongo. So going back to Bajek, I'll say what is striking is the language coming from someone who once served as one of the most recognizable defenders of Cameroon's military establishment and the government. So Bajek is no longer speaking like a government spokesman explaining away institutional shortcomings. He increasingly sounds like an outsider diagnosing the system, carrying out a diagnosis of the system. So his criticism of gold exploitation is illustrative. He said he was scandalized by the manner in which Cameroon's gold resources are being exploited, while associated commentary describes a system where opacity has become not an accident, but almost a method and even a norm. Let's get back to Bajek.
Non, ils ne l'ont pas fait. Bouba Bello aujourd'hui, me dit qu'il a fait un communiqué et après il s'est rétracté. Ce sont des gens qu'on est déjà allé voir, les Cabral libyens, on est déjà allé les voir pour leur proposer des postes ministériels. Il suffirait seulement que 2 d'entre eux reconnaissent les élections, c'est fini. On va les nommer au gouvernement. Non, ce pays, c'est un pays de pourri. De pourri, moi je suis... Et puis quand je vois un peu ce que les bêtis font là, machin, ils se prennent, je ne sais pas pourquoi, c'est eux qui dirigent les écans. Donc ils doivent être là éternellement. C'est ça qui est la question. Alors, moi je commence un peu à en avoir marre, j'en ai marre de... Moi je ne suis pas le larbin de ces gens. Hein. Je ne suis pas le larbin de ces gens, moi je suis même plus là-dedans. Moi les histoires du RDP, c'est le machin et tout, moi je suis très écœuré. Je pensais que quand on arriverait là-bas, on nous laisserait au moins parler, reconstruire sur des sentiers progressifs. Bon, on ne peut pas. Moi, c'est fini. Je te dis, c'est fini. Quand si quelqu'un m'appelle même encore à une réunion, je vais l'insulter. Voilà.
So, my personal analysis of this kind of outing by someone like Budget is that this is really ironical, and the first irony is impossible to miss. This is a man who once stood before cameras to defend the armed forces and to communicate the official version of events during some of Cameroon's most difficult security crises. He defended the government alone, not just the military. Today, retirement has apparently given him considerable more freedom to describe failures that were either invisible, unspeakable, or institutionally inconvenient while he was inside the system. That does not automatically make every present criticism correct, but politically it matters because insider criticism carries a different weight from opposition criticism. If we're somebody from the opposition talking, this will come across, differently. If we're just, somebody from the streets talking, this will come across differently. Just like what the brave lady, the activist that spoke first, was saying, comes across differently from what Budget is saying. When someone who once helped explain the state begins describing strategic failure, institutional amnesia, opacity, and poor governance, people naturally ask how much of what he is saying now he already understood why he was still serving. Did he understand all of these things while he was still serving? Is there something he can do differently now that he has started speaking? Perhaps he can also do something else differently, right? Because this speaking is something he could not do while he was within the system. He couldn't speak. Perhaps he also could not act or do something about it when he was in the system. This freedom that he's exercising now, can he push it a notch further? Second irony, Budget's criticism arrives at an exceptionally sensitive moment. Cameroon is already facing prolonged uncertainty over Biya's absence, succession tensions, a vacant vice presidency, internal CPDM rivalries, economic anxiety, and Issa Chiruma's increasingly direct appeals to the military. In that climate, criticism from a former senior military communicator can deepen the perception that dissatisfaction with the existing order is no longer confined to traditional opposition circles only. There is no evidence that Budget is calling for a military revolt. That's not what I am saying. Indeed, he has previously argued that the Cameroonian military should remain republican and warned against romanticizing coup. But his willingness to publicly dissect the system's failures adds another voice from the security establishment's former inner orbit to the broader national conversation. And there are definitely military people who are disgruntled with the system, who are unhappy. There are definitely military people who are listening keenly to what Issa Chiruma Bakari is saying, who are listening carefully to the promises of a better tomorrow for the military itself too, that Issa Chiruma Bakari is making, and who are listening to the people, the civil society, and all those saying enough is enough, and asking whether there is no Captain Traore in Cameroon. So there are people certainly listening. So the context is critical. And the third irony, there is a deeper legitimacy problem here. Systems such as Biya's remain stable not only because of formal institutions, but also because influential insiders continue projecting confidence in them. Insiders continue projecting confidence in them. The moment retired generals, colonels, senior civil servants, former ministers, and ruling party figures begin publicly questioning the incompetence or questioning the competence, transparency, or strategic direction of the system they once defended, the damage is psychological as much as it is political. This is how I look at it. There is nothing that should be swept under the carpet at this point in time. Cameroon is like a powder magazine. Anything can happen at any time and anything can come from any direction. It signals that the old consensus may be fraying. Utterances like this ones from someone like Bajek signal clearly that the old consensus may be fraying. Bajek does not have to turn revolutionary for his words to, hurt the establishment. Simply acknowledging that the system has repeatedly failed strategically can be damaging enough. And that is perhaps the most interesting part of what I'm talking about today. The comedy is not merely that Colonel Bajek is criticizing today what he once defended or what he defended yesterday. The deeper story is that retirement is allowing former custodians of the Biya system to say publicly what the system itself increasingly struggles to deny. I hope you really did catch that. That the deeper story is that retirement is allowing former custodians of the Biya system to say publicly what the system itself is increasingly struggling to deny. When yesterday's spokesman begins diagnosing today's dysfunction, the question becomes unavoidable. Is Bajek changing, or is the system deteriorating so visibly that even its former defenders can no longer comfortably defend it? This is as huge as you should absolutely get it. Coming from Bajek, let's finish his last lines.
Alors, je dis que c'est... bonsoir d'abord, je suis très très déçu parce que je ne suis pas certain qu'on pourra mener ce combat. Tu sais, eux, ils ont la stabilité.
So as I pointed earlier, this kind of outings would definitely be, deepening fissures that are already existing out there. And of course, as we move from Didier Bajek, I will get to another gentleman, another voice that also carries some weight within Cameroon media circles. I'm talking here of Sam Severin Ango. Let's listen to Sam Severin Ango.
Ne me permettent pas d'être fier d'être Camerounais par ces temps qui courent. Nous sommes ridicules aux yeux du monde entier. Voyez-vous, une telle actualité, ce n'est pas à nous de venir la décrypter pour savoir le bien fondé ou alors les tenants et les aboutissants d'une telle chose. Alors, je dois rappeler qu'à la base, c'est Polycarpe Somba, d'origine camerounaise, qui est maintenant à la rédaction centrale de Radio France Internationale à Paris. Il n'est même plus en poste au Cameroun, qui nous renseigne sur le fait qu'il y a quelques jours, au Cameroun, on a frôlé la catastrophe institutionnelle. Et jusqu'à ce jour, nous sommes à la fin du mois de juin, aucune voix officielle. Vous n'êtes pas la voix officielle, Monsieur Chowal.
So, you see, Sam Severin Ango is sounding another very interesting alarm. What he's talking about is quite interesting and very sensitive, because a lot of the things that are happening within very private governing circles in Cameroon appear in international media even faster than it gets even to some of the members of those inner circles in Cameroon, of those inner governing circles in Cameroon. Increasingly, the people have taken their infighting into the columns of the international media, making a mockery of the entire country. And when that is happening, the government remains mute. Oh yes. So in this short video, Ango focuses on the extraordinary atmosphere surrounding speculation about an impending government reshuffle. He was speaking in June, but it still makes a lot of sense even this July. His principal complaint is that information about who is supposedly entering or leaving government appears to be circulating outside normal institutional channels before any authoritative presidential announcement. For him, the proliferation of purported lists, leaks, names, and the competing versions points to something deeper than ordinary political gossip, a serious disorder surrounding the exercise and communication of presidential power. Listen, Paul Biya, I guess for almost 38 years, was all-powerful, revered, seriously feared, and just mention of anything regarding presidential power could land people in places unimaginable. But today that has changed. Paul Biya today is about just a mere picture of who he was yesterday. And the center of gravity is no longer holding. That's the center is no longer holding. Everything is falling apart. That's why Sam Severin Ango's message effectively asks a very uncomfortable question. If the appointment of ministers belongs to the president, why is Cameroon witnessing a marketplace of competing information about presidential decisions before the president himself has publicly acted? The atmosphere allows political factions, aspiring ministers, insiders, media operators, and the people claiming privileged access to A2D to circulate information that the public has little ability to authenticate. And the key word here is authentication. Because I assure you, today, carry that Paul Biya and put him at Post Central and let him stand physically like this and he's talking to people. There are people who will still tell you that that figure that was placed there is, if they don't tell you that it is AI, they will tell you that it is someone who has won things and all whatnot to, look like Biya. That is a Biya double. That's how bad it has gone. So talk less of decrees. Because you see, decrees come out today, and the next minute you see people on earth decrees signed in earlier years, put them side by side, and they're saying, look at these signatures and tell me whether they match. So this tells you that there is no confidence in anything, meaning any decree which is taking a far-reaching decision is unlikely to be accepted because there will be an authentication problem. So Ango therefore treats the reshuffle controversy as another symptom of a system suffering from opacity and institutional confusion. Instead of government business proceeding through recognizable channels, presidential decision, authenticated decrees, or official publication and implementation, the country is increasingly consuming rumors about decisions allegedly being prepared somewhere behind the curtains. So his frustration is essentially with a political system in which nobody outside a narrow circle, a very narrow circle, can confidently determine what has actually been decided, who decided it, and which information genuinely carries presidential authority. Yesterday there was something that used to be referred to as the très haute instruction. But more and more, très haute instruction is dead. Très haute instruction is dead. And in the place of très haute instruction is now confusion. Absolute confusion. With things flying from left and right, with members of the same government neutralizing each other either in social media or in international media space. That's why Sam Severin Ango says it is really difficult now for him to proudly really say he is a Cameroonian. That is how bad it has got. Let's hear him again just a little, and then I'll bring you my take about his answer.
Quand on nous dit que le chef de l'État a commis une enquête, est-ce que c'est vous qui devez venir nous le dire? Où est la voie officielle à travers laquelle le gouvernement camerounais, la présidence de la République du Cameroun, qui est dans la rue aujourd'hui, vient informer ses compatriotes pour même d'abord nous rassurer? Vous savez, nous les voyageurs ne me permettent pas d'être fier d'être...
So you hear, Sam Severin Ango says the presidency of the Republic is now on the streets. A sort of saying in the gutters. Why is this more serious than just reshuffle gossip? Because this is where Ango's intervention becomes particularly relevant to the situation we are analyzing today. Under normal circumstances, rumors of a cabinet reshuffle are routine in Cameroon. Of course, you always had those rumors, even when Biya was sound, safe, strong, and acting. So, these are not normal circumstances. That's where the problem is. The problem right now is that the circumstances are no longer normal. Paul Biya has now been outside of the country for an extraordinarily prolonged period. Questions continue about his health and his eventual return. Succession maneuvering has intensified, and the competing factions are increasingly being discussed around the presidency. That is why the context today is different from what it was yesterday, where rumor could just have been taken as rumor because it was easy to know when, the blast of the whistle has gone. So consequently, a leaked government list today carries a completely different political meaning. The question is no longer simply who will become minister. It becomes who possesses sufficient access to Paul Biya to know what he has or to know what he supposedly intends. Who is preparing the lists? Who is doing that? Who is leaking them? And are rival factions floating names to test reactions, eliminate opponents, or position themselves for the post-Biya order? In a highly personalized system like the one under review, uncertainty surrounding the intentions of the individual at its center inevitably produces competition among those claiming to speak for him. And let me be clear, each list that comes out now creates new enmities. Because you should know, if Joseph Betty Asomo has his way right now, he will pick Atanga Ponji and place him where no one will want to, where not even he, Atanga Ponji himself, will want to see himself. Because of the leaked supposed government that indicates that Atanga Ponji was being named Minister of Defense. If there was some degree of entente going on between John Gute and Elung Polche, that is dead right now. From the moment John Gute discovered that Elung Polche's name was on that leaked government that failed as the new prime minister, head of government. So you ask yourself, therefore, and there are many other names on this. So you see that each leak wouldn't be taken like things that happened before. Because these people now inevitably are considered to be in a camp that is opposing the Bulu camp. They are directly positioned against the interest of Feref Biya's son, Franck Emmanuel Biya. So consequently, like I pointed out, this creates a more serious and a more precarious situation. And this is where Ango's exasperation intersects remarkably with Kenneth Bajek's criticism. We talked about it a while ago. Bajek complains about institutional communication and strategic failure. Ango effectively points to one of the consequences. When authoritative institutions fail to communicate convincingly, rumor becomes an alternative institution. Because regarding even that failed government, or what Ango says was like a coup that failed, the Minister of Communication certainly came out with a press release, but he fell short of actually saying who did what, who was involved, who was not involved, and what clear action the government is taking. Social media begins doing the work of the presidency in such circumstances. Anonymous insiders become presidential spokesperson. Every supposed decree becomes potentially believable because the public no longer possesses a sufficiently transparent mechanism for separating presidential decisions from political fabrication. So there is an even more troubling dimension to what Sam Severin Ango is saying. When this is placed, beside the earlier controversy over the purported vice presidential appointment. So whether individual leaked documents are genuine or fabricated is precisely why authentication matters. And I said a thing a while ago about authentication. A state becomes vulnerable when citizens cannot immediately distinguish an authentic presidential act from a factional maneuver conducted in the president's name. If Paul Biya were visibly presiding over government from Yaoundé, much of this could be extinguished with a meeting, as he holds a meeting, a decree that, is acting, and there is a decree that dispels all of this, appearance, or, some authoritative statement, or you see him holding a council of ministers session. But his prolonged absence instead creates an information vacuum, and political actors inevitably rush to occupy such vacuums. So Ango's intervention can be distilled into a much bigger question for all to understand and put in context. And this is how I look at it. Cameroon's problem is no longer simply that everybody wants to know who will enter the next government. The frightening question is why so many people appear capable of claiming knowledge of Paul Biya's decisions while the president himself remains thousands of kilometers or thousands of miles away and largely invisible. When competing factions begin leaking tomorrow's government before today's president has spoken, the reshuffle stops being gossip. It becomes another window into the struggle over who actually controls power in Yaoundé. And that is what makes Ango's frustration worth connecting to that of Bajek, to the issue raised by Bajek. One former insider warns that the system has lost strategic coherence. Another political voice points to the resulting confusion. Put the two together, and the emerging story is not merely a government waiting to be reshuffled. It is a power structure increasingly struggling to convince Cameroonians that somebody is firmly holding the steering wheel. Because right now, the struggle is really to convince Cameroonians that somebody, somewhere, is still so firmly holding the steering wheel. And that is a thing that the people are increasingly unwilling to swallow. Let's take a 15 seconds break, and when we come back, we go straight to Geneva to see what is going on there in the rivalry between Chantal, Biya, and Mvondo Ayolo. You're welcome back. I saw an article that is moving widely on social media, captioned "Serious Situation in Geneva. Chantal Biya drives Mvondo Ayolo away from Paul Biya." That Chantal Biya has passed an injunction that she no longer wants to see Mvondo Ayolo enters Paul Biya's sick room. So the mystery surrounding Cameroonian President Paul Biya has now crossed the Mediterranean. And these are the protagonists. As the head of state approaches his 50th day outside Cameroon, allegedly for medical reasons that are generating intense speculation in Yaoundé, meaning Cameroon's political destiny is increasingly being played out on the shores of Lake Geneva. So according to a blogger who shared this information that I'm dissecting right now, Biya's current stay in Switzerland is extraordinary for both its duration and the alleged medical circumstances. He claims that after undergoing intensive treatment, Biya is presently unable to travel, and he further alleges that the presidential Airbus A319 that had arrived in Switzerland to return Paul Biya to Cameroon left again this Sunday. That is today, because Paul Biya's health had rather deteriorated and not improved as expected. And he further alleges that Biya has undergone 4 major surgical procedures, including one on the 13th of July. My goodness. 4, not 2, 4, not 3, 4, not 1. But the most dramatic allegation from that information concerns the First Lady Chantal Biya and Samuel Mvondo Ayolo, who is director of the Civil Cabinet. So according to the blogger, Chantal has barred Mvondo Ayolo from accessing Paul Biya's sick room because she suspects him of working against her interests and of having frustrated, the alleged attempt involving Oswald Baboke and the vice presidency of the Republic of Cameroon. In that article, the blogger says Chantal's cousin, Cleopas Medulu, consequently, is the only one whom Chantal allows to enjoy unfettered access to Paul Biya on his sick bed right now. That's why see me displaying the 2 giants there. So these allegations have not independently verified them, because as at the time I was getting to the studio, I'd reached out to a couple of people who generally should be knowledgeable about this, and they were yet to verify that information and to confirm that to me. So like I said, none of my sources has confirmed this information just yet. But what is independently significant, however, is that Africa Confidential, that's a respectable and a credible news outlet, recently identified both Chantal Biya and Mvondo Ayolo as important actors around Paul Biya in Geneva, noting that Mvondo Ayolo's presence is important for authenticating presidential decisions. And so the blogger's ultimate argument is that Geneva has effectively become a temporary center of Cameroonian power, with rival networks maneuvering around an aging president while the struggle over succession becomes increasingly intense. Oh yes, because the struggle has gained steam and is even continuing to gain steam by the day. Let's look at the bigger story, because the bigger story is no longer simply, Paul Biya's health. This is where the report becomes, particularly important, and that's why I haven't dared to carry it without getting independent confirmation, because it's politically very important. Even if I temporarily, remove some of the essentially, sensational allegations that were involved. Paul Biya left Cameroon on June 7 for what his own civil cabinet described as a brief private stay in Europe. International media reports confirm that Paul Biya has already been outside Cameroon for more than 45 days, and that confirmation from the international media was 4 days ago. And with no announced a return date, By this weekend, today Sunday that I am talking, reporting is now placing Paul Biya's absence at approximately 49 to 50 days. So that creates tremendous contradiction. The presidency continues insisting that Paul Biya remains in command and that he receives government files remotely, treats them, even signs decrees, but which decrees come back online with signatures not looking like previous documents he signed. Which create a gap and create credibility issues, while opponents increasingly describe Cameroon as operating on autopilot. And that's what I said before in another broadcast, that Cameroon to me right now is on autopilot. So let's suppose that the reported Chantal Mvondo rupture is actually substantiated. Then the story becomes substantially more serious. Mvondo Ayolo is not simply another member of Paul Biya's entourage. It's not just any member of Paul Biya's entourage. It's not just any one loitering around the presidency. It's not just some Atang and Ponji or some Rene Emmanuel Sadian or whatnot, that's communication minister, or Jacques Famendongo, who is somewhere. No. As director of the civil cabinet, Mvondo occupies a critical position between the president and the machinery surrounding presidential acts. Africa Confidential specifically reports that Mvondo Ayolo is in Geneva and describes his role as authenticating decisions taken by Paul Biya. That's how the international media views Mvondo Ayolo and his role in Geneva. So if the president were simply incapacitated, and we do not have verified evidence establishing that, then controlling physical and documentary access to him could become extraordinarily important. Who sees the president? Who takes documents to him? Who witnesses his instructions? Who can credibly say the president has decided left, right, center, up, north, south? Who authenticates what emerges from Geneva? Now, if this story is true, that Chantal successfully ejected Mvondo Ayolo from getting any form of access to Paul Biya on his sickbed, suddenly access becomes power. That is why the allegation that Chantal Biya has excluded Mvondo Ayolo, if eventually corroborated, as I'm saying, would matter far beyond a family disagreement. It could suggest that the struggle around Biya has moved from competition over who succeeds him towards, competition over who controls access to presidential authority while Paul Biya is still formally in office. And that is a precarious position Cameroon now occupies. This is happening while the vice presidency remains on field. Biya has yet to name a new government expected following the October 2025 presidential election. The CPDM has just held a rare senior level meeting and came away from there without any clear-cut resolution to show that the big guns have come to a consensus as to what this succession should look like. And succession concerns are increasingly entering the mainstream political discussion. Africa Confidential reports that Paul Biya's absence has already delayed decisions in Yaoundé and sharpened concern over the unnamed vice presidency. And worse, the president of the Senate has been removed from the line of succession, removed from, the ability to manage any transition. So right now, anything happens to Paul Biya, oh my goodness. You'll be hearing they will be screaming in Yaoundé, so we keep it. So add to this, Issa Chiruma's continuing challenge to the 2025 presidential election results and his extraordinary recent appeal directly to the armed forces and the political picture becomes even more combustible. I like the word, right? Combustible. I said the country right now is like a powder magazine. The danger is therefore not simply Biya is sick. No. The more defensible and the potentially more important conclusion that can bring here is Cameroon increasingly has two centers of gravity. Two centers of gravity. Constitutional government remains formally anchored in Yaoundé, but the man around whom that government has revolved for more than 4 decades remains thousands of kilometers away in Geneva, Switzerland. If rival factions are now fighting over access to that man, Geneva is no longer merely where Paul Biya is staying. It potentially becomes an extension of the battlefield over who controls the final chapter of the Biya presidency. So what I'm saying in substance on this last segment is that the battlefield over the succession politics in Cameroon has moved from Etudi Yaoundé to Geneva, Switzerland. And to go by the allegations contained in that article I was talking about, published by a blogger, of course, that blogger has credibility. Then you understand that Chantal Biya now leads Mvondo Ayolo in round 1. So say Chantal floors Mvondo Ayolo in round 1. So wait to see what round 2 will look like. And while all this is going on, the Cameroon military, that anyone sensible would expect would rise to the occasion to say this cacophony has to end, that they could stand on the side of their people. They rather prefer to be going out there and dying in a foreign war that they know nothing about. The latest news of Cameroonian casualties in the Russia-Ukraine war today is body Nicolas Yves. And you see the family is in pains, and they are wondering what is happening to their son because they have lost contact with him since April. And they are wondering if anyone anywhere has any information about him, whether he is still alive or whether he is dead. And this is a very humiliating experience of people going to die in foreign wars where their own country absolutely needs them to help bring back order, to help bring back constitutional order, to help the people, begin to think of a future brighter than what it really is right now. And what hurts me is that those soldiers going to die in the war between Russia and Ukraine are not only citizens of La République du Cameroun, they include even citizens of the southern Cameroons. When we have a bigger fight back at home to pay attention to. While all this is going on in La République du Cameroun, the people of the southern Cameroons are taking serious note. The people of the southern Cameroons are, paying careful attention. The people of the southern Cameroons are watching with a lot of eagerness. I can hear shouts in some places as to let the tsunami begin. I want to thank all of you who took time off this late to be on this live show with me. I want to really thank you for your patience and thank you for continuing to support this platform, the JNA Connections. If this is the first time you're visiting on this platform, please go right ahead, hit on that subscribe button and personalize so that anytime something new drops here, you will be the first to know. Because like I said, anytime I know, you will definitely also know. And of course, you will even be the first to know. And do not forget to share the link to this communication as much as possible. Let's reach as many people as possible. We need to continue to stay mobilized. We need to continue to stay sensitized. And do not forget to, drop a comment, be part of the conversation. Let's avoid attacking people. Let's stay focused on the issues. And of course, drop the like. Like I said, it always goes a very long way. So thank you very much for your very kind attention. And as usual, I will say to God and to Him alone be all the glory.
Nos frères Ambazonia ont encore frappé fort. Voilà 2 soldats qui nous ont encore quittés. Mais mes frères militaires là, policiers là, vous défendez quoi dans le nozo? Vous cherchez quoi dans le nozo? On vous parle d'un peuple qui se bat pour sa liberté. Comme le peuple francophone n'a pas le courage de se battre, comme nos frères du nozo sont en train de se battre. Vous partez tout le temps là-bas. Vous endeuillez vos familles par rapport à quoi? Pourquoi? Pour ça, voilà Judith Rachida, PDG de Chantal, en train de faroter l'argent. Quand vous vous levez le matin, vous n'avez même pas de quoi manger. Vous vous levez le matin, vous n'avez pas de quoi boire. Vous n'avez pas la possibilité d'envoyer vos enfants à l'école. En 2025, on a volé vos élections. En 2018, on a volé vos élections. En 1992, on a volé vos élections. Un vieux père de 93 ans. Vous partez là-bas, vous daillez pour qui? Pourquoi? Voilà la plus grande tchélée du pays à qui on est en train de donner l'argent. Vous vous battez pour qui? Pourquoi? Les chrétiens coûtés sont là-bas, mangent leur vie. Les Judith Rachida, PDG de Chantal, mangent leur vie. Tous les ministres sont là-bas, mangent leur vie. Vous gotez, vous daillez. Daillez même au moins pour la bonne cause. Ce n'est pas la secte pourquoi que vous êtes en train de combattre, les gars. Vous êtes en train de combattre vos propres frères, vos compatriotes. On ne vous a pas envoyé qu'il aime les terreaux. On vous a envoyé qu'il aime vos propres frères. Vous allez vous battre. Et tous les jours, vous daillez. Vous croyez que nous, on peut être contre nos frères Ambazonia quand ils gèrent les mouvements comme ça, là? Vous croyez que nous, on peut être contre eux? Regardez la dame-ci. Vous croyez que c'est la dame-ci, avec son salaire normal, à la fin du mois, le PDG de Chantal est dans les 500, 600 000 francs CFA. Vous croyez qu'elle devait faroter l'argent comme ça? Les liasses de Didi Kolo. Vous êtes là, vous gotez là-bas. Parce que vos frères ont dit que non. La constitution de notre pays, on est une partie souveraine. On veut que les lois de notre pays soient les lois de notre pays. Paul Biya prend ses frères et Kambeti Boulou. Il envoie là-bas pour leur commander, pour leur dire ce qu'ils doivent faire. Alors que les traités du pays ne le permettent pas. Quand nos frères du Nord se lèvent, vous vous levez. On vous envoie avec le gun, le kilam. Vous êtes...
If you are asking my personal opinion to keep Cameroon one must be divisible. Because it's a cliche that Cameroon is one and indivisible. Because it's not true. Culturally we are divisible. Language-wise we are divisible. The law-wise we have inherited that. So anybody who says Cameroon is one and indivisible is a fallacy. And so we would have to handle that issue very squarely and objectively. And that's what I call the truth. The truth must prevail. There is no doubt that there are people of both sides, that cherish their heritage. And the only way of keeping Cameroon together is to respect the respective heritages that we do have.
Asawana, Asawana, Asabuam, Asabuam, Esimene. Yeah, fellow Ambazonians, today is the 18th of February 2026. A Major General Tokandu and his court live there for Kumbu Town. Now one Ekelebe this way he come out today. The patrol for we street them like say now them get the area. But when we don't give them message, say we na a land of no return. Now one example, this one we don't settle for them. How we them there for Kumbu? They don't come settle for them. They make like say now them get the area. You want to serve as a message for the remaining terrorism were in there for inside town. Make them know say Buitutu na a land of no return. For sleep, not be say you don't die. For the sleep, not be say you don't die. We warriors they alive. We warriors ASA we they alive. And we take them down one by one. Now once zombie this way we don't kill them. We confront inside town, we shoot them. We take it, we see their life, we want come back for road, he die for road. We want make him confess for him up. No be so? No be so? Space there for a kelebe?
No man.
Shake no day.
Nos frères Ambazonia ont encore frappé fort. Voilà 2 soldats qui nous ont encore quittés. Mais mes frères militaires là, policiers là, vous défendez quoi dans le nozo? Vous cherchez quoi dans le nozo? On vous parle d'un peuple qui se bat pour sa liberté. Comme le peuple francophone n'a pas le courage de se battre, comme nos frères du nozo sont en train de se battre. Vous partez tout le temps là-bas. Vous endeuillez vos familles par rapport à quoi? Pourquoi? Pour ça, voilà Judith Rachida, PDG de Chantal, en train de faroter l'argent. Quand vous vous levez le matin, vous n'avez même pas de quoi manger. Vous vous levez le matin, vous n'avez pas de quoi boire. Vous n'avez pas la possibilité d'envoyer vos enfants à l'école. En 2025, on a volé vos élections. En 2018, on a volé vos élections. En 1992, on a volé vos élections. Un vieux père de 93 ans. Vous partez là-bas, vous daillez pour qui? Pourquoi? Voilà la plus grande tchélée du pays à qui on est en train de donner l'argent. Vous vous battez pour qui? Pourquoi? Les chrétiens coûtés sont là-bas, mangent leur vie. Les juges Rachid, PDG de Chantal mangent leur vie. Tous les ministres sont là-bas, mangent leur vie. Vous vous gotez, vous daillez. Daillez même au moins pour la bonne cause. Ce n'est pas la secte pourquoi que vous êtes en train de combattre, les gars. Vous êtes en train de combattre vos propres frères, de vos compatriotes. On ne vous a pas envoyé qu'il aime les terreaux. On vous a envoyé qu'il aime vos propres frères. Vous allez vous partir. Et tous les jours, vous daillez. Vous croyez que nous, on peut être contre nos frères Ambazonia quand ils gèrent les mouvements comme ça, là? Vous croyez que nous, on peut être contre eux? Regardez la dame-ci. Vous croyez que c'est la dame-ci, avec son salaire normal, à la fin du mois, le PDG de Chantal est dans les 500, 600 000 francs CFA. Vous croyez qu'elle devait faroter l'argent comme ça? Les liasses de Didicolo. Vous êtes là, vous gotez là-bas. Parce que vos frères ont dit que non. La constitution de notre pays, on est une partie souveraine. On veut que les lois de notre pays soient les lois de notre pays. Paul Biya prend ses frères et Kambeti Boulou. Il envoie là-bas pour leur commander, pour leur dire ce qu'ils doivent faire. Alors que les traités du pays ne le permettent pas. Quand nos frères du Nord se lèvent, vous vous levez. On vous envoie avec le gun, le kilam. Vous êtes...
I come today to make 2 things clear. The first thing is, there is no one in the diaspora sending children in Cameroon to go and die on the streets. Nobody's sending children out to the streets to go and die. Those children are fighting for their own freedom. They are the ones who are unemployed. They are the ones who do not have food to eat. They are the ones who are driving on bad roads. They are the ones who are suffering the most from Paul Biya's regime. They are the ones who do not have schools. They are the ones who do not have clean water to drink. They are the ones who do not have electricity. They are the ones who do not have internet. It's not the people in the diaspora. So they feel the pinch, and that is what is driving them to go out and fight. It's not anybody in the diaspora pushing them. What they are going through under Biya's regime is what is pushing them to the streets. So I want anybody who is thinking that it's people in the diaspora pushing people out there to go and fight should think twice. Should think twice. Why are people in the diaspora? Why are we here in the first place? So how do we think, or how can we sit and accuse or point fingers at other people that they're pushing children to go and die in the streets, when we know exactly why those children are fighting? We know why they are out in the streets. They are tired. They are hungry. They are sick. They are unemployed. They don't have schools. They're driving on very bad roads. That's why they are on the streets. If anybody does not understand that, then you need to see a doctor. The second thing I want to make clear is the hypocrisy in all of this. We cannot pretend that we feel for those children, or that we feel for the families who lost loved ones in the Anglophone fight, and yet we sit with the same people who go out campaigning for Paul Biya, we sit on the same table with them and dine with them in the name of schoolmates, classmates. We cannot be dining with those people. We cannot even be having a conversation with them, knowing that they are the ones enabling Paul Biya to do what he's doing. That is hypocrisy. That is hypocrisy. We have seen all the Anglophones in high-profile offices who went out there to campaign for Paul Biya, who said Paul Biya has built schools when Paul Biya has not built any school. Those who went right to Bamenda and said Paul Biya has built roads when he has not built any roads in Bamenda. If anything, they have killed our children. And all these people are responsible for the death of all the Anglophones who died. All of them. Every Anglophone serving in this regime is a traitor. Every single one. And for us to sit with those same people, look at them in their faces, have a cordial conversation with them, to the point of dining with them, then we are not different from them. Then we can consider ourselves enablers as well. I'm saying this because I talked about it on a forum and I got some calls and some messages from members of those forums asking me why I should say that people should be excommunicated from groups. Really? Really? Why this hypocrisy? Why? And we are saying we want a better Cameroon? Why are we pretending? Why are we pretending? If you can stand and talk against Paul Biya, and you cannot talk against those who are supporting and campaigning for him, knowing exactly what he has done, then even you who called me, or you who sent me that message, just don't want to call names. You are not different from them. You're not different from them. Some told me that we should respect their beliefs. You should respect the belief of someone who believes that other people's children should be killed. That people should be kidnapping people. That those are the beliefs you want us to support. It is not as if there are two parties or people are disagreeing on policies. That is not the case here. It's not as if we are disagreeing on policies. If that was the case, that would even be better. Because when you have two parties like they have in the United States, the two sides don't agree on certain policies. And it's because one thinks they can do better for the country. Their competition is to do better for the country. It's not a case where people are killing children. The country has gone 50 years behind. We are living here today because we cannot live there. And somebody says, I should respect their beliefs. Come on, people. Come on. This is why I keep saying we do not love that country enough. We do not love ourselves enough to really want to see change. Because if we did, we will do things differently. We cannot pretend. We cannot pretend that we want to see change and we dine with those people. That is pretense. That is hypocrisy. I don't talk my own.
Cameroon may be approaching the moment when history stops whispering and starts pounding at the door with force. 42 years after the failed 1984 coup swept Issa Chiruma Bakary into years of imprisonment, despite his denying involvement, he is now openly appealing to the very military that helped save Paul Biya's presidency. But Paul Biya is now 93, succession is unsettled, the vice presidency remains vacant, and uncertainty hangs over Yaoundé. Could the institution that helped preserve the Biya era in 1984 ultimately determine how that era ends? Stay with me, because that is where this history becomes explosive. Hello, good evening. You're welcome to the JMA Connections, and today is Friday, the 24th of July, 2026, and we are going to delve into some very interesting discussion today regarding a message delivered by Issa Chiruma Bakary on the 20th of July to the military of Cameroon. What really is the significance of that message? Is Issa Chiruma just a noisemaker, or is there something amidst?
En ma qualité de chef de l'État démocratiquement élu et de chef des armées, et à un mois de la célébration de la fête des armées, le 14 août 2026, je vous rends un vibrant hommage, hommes et femmes en tenue, pour la tâche qui vous incombe, notamment de défendre l'intégrité de notre territoire.
Issa Chiruma Bakary's decision to address the Cameroonian military directly is politically significant, really significant, because it moves his challenge to the Biya government beyond ordinary politics. I'd say beyond ordinary politics and into the sensitive question of where the armed forces place their loyalty when electoral legitimacy is disputed. You know, since Cameroon returned to multi-party politics in 1990, election after election have been marked by protests, and each of them, Paul Biya has done the very same thing. Use the army, repress the people, make some arrests, and a lot of the time kill a number of young people, and the people finally run under their beds. The atmosphere grows calm, and Paul Biya continues to reign. But this time around, the dynamics are different. a presidential candidate, has gone on exile, continues to declare himself the winner of the election, and continues to call himself the legitimate president. After a moment of hibernation, when Issa Chiroma only spoke through proxies, Issa Chiroma is today, more than ever before, from the same Gambia, being extremely vocal. And he's not just talking, he's saying a lot of very pertinent things and carrying out some concrete actions, like suing President Paul Biya and some of his regime barons in both France and Switzerland. So in July 2026, that is this month, Chiroma appealed to the defense and security forces to facilitate his return from exile in the Gambia, while continuing to maintain that he won the October 2025 presidential election. There is an African proverb that says, when you find a toad dancing in broad daylight, know pretty well that there is a drummer in a nearby bush. So the question that we ask ourselves at this point, is Chiroma just a noisemaker? Is he just bickering? Is he just ranting? Does he just want to stay, say, politically relevant, or he just does not want to get out of the news? Evidence on the ground points to the effect that there is massive discontent. Evidence on the ground points to the effect that there is a growing malaise, even within the ranks of the military of La République du Cameroon, that has generally been loyal to and has supported Paul Biya unconditionally, keeping him in government as president right up to this moment. But the significance of Issa Chiroma Bakari's pointed address directly to the military is threefold. First, he is implicitly arguing that the military should distinguish between loyalty to the state and loyalty to the sitting government. Now, at this point, you ask yourself the question, is that army not aware that this is what it ought to do? Does it need some Issa Chiroma Bakari to come and remind the army of their role, that they are a Republican army and ought to be loyal not to an individual, but to institutions, but to a state? The second significance is that by asking soldiers to assist his return or refuse to sustain what he regards as an illegitimate political order, Issa Chiroma Bakari is attempting to penetrate one of the principal pillars upon which the Biya system depends. Why do I call it one of the principal pillars upon which the Biya government depends? The Biya government